The first Marine didn't knock. He pushed the ICU doors open like he had every right to be there. The sound of his boots hitting the polished hospital floor echoed through the hallway, heavy, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Behind him, 3 more Marines followed in full-dress uniform. Their faces were calm, focused, serious. Not a single one of them looked around in confusion. They knew exactly where they were going. Inside ICU room 12, machines hummed softly. Heart monitors beeped in slow, steady rhythms. Nurses moved between rooms with routine efficiency. No one noticed the Marines yet, except her. She stood near the patient's bedside, adjusting an IV line with steady hands. Her posture was calm, her movements precise, her face unreadable. Her name was Emily Carter. Most people in the hospital barely knew it. To them, she was just another ICU nurse. Quiet, invisible, replaceable. She never talked much, never complained, never slowed down, and never asked for recognition. Even now, as the distant sound of boots grew louder in the hallway, Emily didn't react. She finished adjusting the IV, checked the monitor, and gently placed the patient's hand back onto the bed. Her movements carried a strange kind of discipline, not rushed, not careless, controlled, like she had done this in places where mistakes cost more than lawsuits, mistakes that cost lives. Outside the room, the Marine stopped. A young nurse at the front desk looked up, confused. "Can I help you?" she asked nervously. The Marine in front didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the ICU floor with quiet intensity. He wasn't looking for directions. He was looking for someone. Inside room 12, Emily finished writing notes on the patient's chart. Her handwriting was neat, clean, efficient. She didn't hear the front desk nurse repeat herself. "Sir, this area is restricted," the Marine spoke. His voice was calm, controlled. "We're here for Staff Sergeant Carter." The words hung in the air like a sudden drop in temperature. The front desk nurse frowned. "I'm sorry, there's no staff sergeant here." The Marine didn't react. He simply looked past her, toward room 12. Inside, Emily paused, not because she heard the words, but because she felt something. A shift, the kind you only recognize when you've lived long enough in danger. Slowly, she set the pen down. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark hospital window. For a moment, she didn't look like a nurse. She looked like someone else, someone older, someone hardened, someone who had buried parts of herself long ago. In the hallway, the Marines began walking again, each step closer, each step carrying a past Emily had worked very hard to leave behind. 3 months earlier, Emily Carter had arrived at St. Gabriel Medical Center without fanfare, no introduction, no special treatment, no announcement, just paperwork, orientation, and silence. She kept to herself from the beginning. While other nurses laughed during breaks and shared stories, Emily sat alone, reviewing patient charts, preparing supplies, always ready, always focused. Some of the staff found her strange. Others found her cold. "She acts like she's above everyone," one nurse whispered once. Emily heard it. She always heard everything, but she never responded. She didn't need to, because she wasn't there to make friends. She was there to work, and she worked harder than anyone. She took extra shifts, volunteered for difficult patients, stayed calm during emergencies when others panicked. Doctors noticed it. They trusted her, but they didn't know her. No one did, because Emily never talked about her past. Not her family, not her life before the hospital, nothing. It was like she didn't exist before she walked through those doors. One night, a patient went into sudden cardiac arrest. The room exploded into chaos. Machines alarmed. Nurses rushed in. The young resident froze. His hands shook. He hesitated. Emily didn't. She moved instantly. Her voice cut clean through the panic. Clear. Her hands performed CPR with perfect rhythm. Precise. Controlled. Not rushed. Not desperate. Professional. Like muscle memory. Like she had done it hundreds of times before. The patient survived. Later, the resident approached her. "How did you stay so calm?" he asked. Emily didn't look at him. She simply said, "Training." Nothing more. He assumed she meant nursing school. He had no idea how wrong he was. Back in the present, the sound of boots stopped outside room 12. Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment. She already knew why they were here. She had known this day would come eventually. You couldn't disappear forever. Not from them. Not from that life. Slowly, she turned toward the door. Outside, 4 United States Marines stood waiting. Not impatient, not aggressive. Respectful. Like soldiers awaiting orders. The lead Marine raised his hand and knocked. 3 soft knocks. Emily stared at the door. Her heart didn't race. Her breathing didn't change. But something deep inside her shifted. Something she had buried. Something she had tried to forget. On the other side of the door, the Marine spoke, his voice steady, formal. Staff Sergeant Carter. A pause. "We've come to escort you." The words hit the air like a quiet explosion. Inside the ICU, machines continued their steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Emily Carter looked down at her nurse uniform, at the name tag that simply read, Emily. Not Staff Sergeant, not Marine, just Emily. For a moment, she said nothing. And outside, 4 Marines waited in absolute silence, not for a nurse, but for their staff sergeant. The ICU had never felt this quiet before. Even the machines seemed to lower their voices. Emily stood motionless inside room 12, staring at the door. On the other side, 4 United States Marines waited with a patience that only came from discipline carved deep into bone. But out in the hallway, confusion had already begun spreading. Nurse Kelly leaned toward the front desk, nurse whispering urgently, "Who are they looking for?" The front desk nurse shook her head slowly. They said, "Staff Sergeant Carter." Kelly frowned. "We don't have anyone with that name." Across the ICU floor, Dr. Harrison stepped out of a patient room, adjusting his gloves. He noticed the Marines instantly. His brows tightened. This wasn't normal. Hospitals saw police sometimes, security occasionally, but Marines, in full dress uniform? Never. He walked toward them with professional authority. "Excuse me," he said calmly. "I'm Dr. Harrison. Can I help you?" The lead Marine turned his head slightly. His eyes were sharp, focused. "We're here on official business." His tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't a request either. Dr. Harrison felt it immediately. This wasn't a conversation he controlled. Still, he pressed forward. "You're disrupting patient care." The Marine didn't react. He simply said, "We'll be brief." His posture straight, his hands relaxed at his sides, but his eyes were locked on room 12, watching, waiting, like he already knew she was there. Inside the room, Emily exhaled slowly. She hadn't opened the door yet, not because she was afraid, but because she understood what it meant. Once she opened it, everything would change. Out in the hallway, whispers grew louder. They looked serious. "Is someone in trouble? This is ridiculous. They can't just walk in here." She glanced toward room 12, toward Emily. But she didn't connect the dots, because in her mind, Emily was just Emily, the quiet nurse, the invisible one, the one nobody paid attention to. It hadn't always been intentional. At first, Emily's silence simply made people uncomfortable. She didn't gossip, didn't complain, didn't laugh at break room jokes. She just worked. And in environments like hospitals, silence stood out more than noise. People began making assumptions. She's antisocial. She thinks she's better than everyone. She's weird. Emily heard it all and ignored it all because none of it mattered. Not compared to the things she had already survived. One afternoon, a patient's family member became aggressive. He shouted at the nurse's station, demanding answers, demanding control. Kelly stepped back, nervous. Dr. Harrison tried to calm him. It didn't work. The man slammed his fist on the counter. "I want someone who knows what they're doing." Before anyone else could react, Emily stepped forward. Her movement was calm, deliberate. She didn't raise her voice, didn't threaten him. She simply stood there, looking directly into his eyes, her posture straight, unshaken. There was something in her stare, something cold, something controlled. The man's anger faded almost instantly. His shoulders lowered, his voice softened. He stepped back, and without another word, he left. The nurses stared at Emily, confused. "How did you do that?" Kelly asked. Emily didn't answer. She simply returned to her work, like nothing had happened, because for her, it hadn't. There were other moments, too. Small things, easy to miss, but impossible to explain. One night a loud crash echoed from a supply room. A metal tray had fallen. The sound was sudden, sharp, violent. Every nurse jumped. Except Emily. She didn't flinch, didn't even turn her head right away. Like loud, unexpected noises didn't surprise her anymore. Like her body had already learned to expect chaos. Another time a helicopter flew low over the hospital. The deep rhythmic sound filled the air. Most people ignored it. But Emily froze, just for a second. Her eyes lifted toward the ceiling, listening, recognizing, not with fear, but with memory, painful memory. Then she went back to work. Like it never happened. Dr. Harrison noticed these things. He couldn't explain why, but something about Emily didn't fit. She wasn't just trained, she was conditioned. Her movements were too precise, her reactions too controlled, her awareness too sharp. One evening, he approached her during a quiet shift. "Where did you work before this?" he asked casually. Emily didn't look up from her chart. Different places. He waited, expecting more. Nothing came. He tried again. "You must have had excellent training." Emily paused, just slightly, then said, "Something like that." Her voice gave nothing away, but her eyes, for a brief moment, they carried weight, the kind of weight people didn't get from classrooms, the kind you only got from surviving things you couldn't talk about. Dr. Harrison felt it, and it unsettled him. Back in the present, the Marines still stood outside room 12, unmoving, unwavering. Kelly finally lost patience. She walked toward them. "You can't just stand here," she said. "You're making everyone uncomfortable." The lead Marine looked at her, not angry, not annoyed, just calm. "We're waiting." "For who?" she asked. He didn't answer, because he didn't need to. Inside room 12, Emily reached up slowly. Her fingers touched her name tag. Emily. Such a simple name, such a simple life. But it wasn't her whole truth. It never had been. Outside, the Marines remained perfectly still, not shifting their weight, not checking their phones, not speaking because soldiers understood waiting. They had waited in deserts, in jungles, in darkness. They could wait here too, for her. And deep inside, Emily knew the life she had tried to leave behind had finally come back for her. The knock came again. 3 slow, deliberate taps, not louder than before, not more aggressive, just patient. Certain. Inside room 12, Emily stood frozen for half a second longer. Her eyes remained fixed on the door, her mind already racing ahead of the moment. She had imagined this day, replayed it in her thoughts during quiet nights, wondered how it would feel. Now she knew. It didn't feel like fear. It felt like inevitability. Outside, the ICU staff had stopped pretending to work. Their eyes kept drifting back to the Marines standing in the hallway. Even Dr. Harrison couldn't ignore it anymore. He stepped closer again. "This is a hospital," he said firmly. "If you have business here, you need to explain it." The lead Marine finally turned fully toward him. Up close, Dr. Harrison noticed something different. This wasn't just professionalism, this was respect held in restraint. "We are here to escort one of our own," the Marine said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Dr. Harrison frowned. "One of your own." He glanced around the ICU. There were no Marines here. Only doctors. Only nurses. Only Emily. Inside room 12, Emily exhaled slowly. Her hand moved toward the door handle, then stopped. Her reflection in the glass stared back at her again. But this time, she didn't look like Emily the nurse. She looked like the person she used to be. The person she had buried under layers of silence and routine. Outside, Kelly crossed her arms impatiently. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "They're acting like this is some kind of military base." Behind her, another nurse whispered, "Do you think someone did something wrong? Not here." Her eyes drifted briefly toward room 12, then away, because in her mind, Emily was the last person anyone would come looking for. The door opened. Not suddenly, not dramatically, slowly, deliberately. Emily stepped out into the hallway. The moment she appeared, everything changed. The Marine saw her instantly, not because she moved, not because she made noise, but because they had been waiting for her specifically. The lead Marine's posture shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. He straightened, his chin lifted slightly, his eyes locked onto hers. Around them, the ICU staff watched in confusion. Kelly frowned. Dr. Harrison looked between Emily and the Marines, trying to understand what he was seeing. Emily stood in her nurse uniform. Simple. Ordinary. Her name tag still read Emily. Nothing about her appearance explained why 4 Marines had entered a civilian hospital for her. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence stretched, heavy, electric. Then Emily did something no one expected. She stepped forward, not hesitantly, not nervously, with confidence, with familiarity like she had walked toward Marines many times before. The lead Marine's breathing slowed. He had imagined this moment too. He had wondered how she would look, how she would carry herself. Now he saw the truth. She hadn't lost it. Not the posture, not the authority. She stopped a few feet in front of him. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to, because some recognition didn't require words. Behind them, Kelly whispered, "What's happening?" No one knew, except the Marines. And Emily. The lead Marine's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, in control. His hand moved, slowly, deliberately. He raised it toward his forehead, and then he saluted, perfectly, crisply, without hesitation. The sound of his hand meeting position was soft, but in the silent ICU hallway, it sounded like thunder. Behind him, the other 3 Marines did the same. 4 Marines, standing in perfect formation, saluting a quiet ICU nurse. Kelly's mouth fell open. Dr. Harrison froze. Every nurse in the hallway stared in disbelief, because this wasn't respect given casually. This was respect earned. And Emily returned the salute. Her movement was flawless, automatic, precise, like she had done it thousands of times. Because she had, in deserts, on bases in places no one here could imagine. When her hand lowered, the lead Marine spoke. His voice carried something deeper now. Not authority. Respect. "Staff Sergeant Carter," he said. Not Emily, not nurse, Staff Sergeant. The title echoed through the hallway, and everything changed. Kelly shook her head slightly. "No," she whispered it under her breath, like saying it louder would make it real. Dr. Harrison stared at Emily, at her posture, at the way she stood differently now, like a part of her had awakened. A part she had kept hidden, the lead Marine continued. "We've been ordered to bring you in. Portered. Not requested, not asked. Ordered." Emily didn't react emotionally. She didn't panic, didn't argue. She simply nodded once. Calm. Accepting. Because she understood orders, she always had. Around them, the hospital felt smaller, quieter, like everyone suddenly realized they had never truly known her. Kelly spoke before she could stop herself. "Emily, what is this?" She looked at Kelly, really looked at her, not with anger, not with superiority, just truth, because the truth didn't need emotion, it only needed acceptance. And for the first time since she arrived at the hospital, Emily Carter wasn't invisible anymore. She was Staff Sergeant Carter, and everyone was finally seeing her. No one moved. No one spoke. The entire ICU stood frozen around them, as if time itself had paused to witness the moment. Kelly's eyes darted between Emily and the Marines, searching for some kind of explanation that made sense. But nothing about this made sense. Not the salute, not the title, not the way Emily stood now. Straighter, stronger, different. Dr. Harrison finally found his voice. "Staff Sergeant," he repeated slowly. The words felt foreign in his mouth, like they belonged to someone else, not to the quiet nurse who worked double shifts and never complained. Emily turned toward him. Her expression was calm, but it wasn't the same calm he had seen before. This calm was older, heavier. "I was," she said simply. Was. Past tense. But the Marines were here, which meant the past wasn't finished with her yet. The lead Marine reached into the inside pocket of his uniform and pulled out a small folder. Official, precise. He held it carefully like it carried weight beyond paper. "Staff Sergeant Emily Carter," he said, clearly, his voice carrying across the silent ICU. "United States Marine Corps. Decorated combat medic." A nurse behind Kelly covered her mouth. "Combat medic, not hospital trained. Battlefield trained." The Marine continued. "2 overseas deployments. Images flashed through Emily's mind: sand, heat, blood, screams, things she hadn't allowed herself to remember in years. The Marine's voice softened slightly. Silver Star recipient. Dr. Harrison blinked. He knew that medal, everyone did. It wasn't given for routine service, it was given for extraordinary bravery, for risking your life to save others. Kelly stared at Emily like she was seeing a stranger. "You were in combat," she whispered. Emily didn't answer, because the answer lived in her eyes. And it wasn't something words could explain. The Marine continued. 3 years ago, Staff Sergeant Carter was officially discharged. Released, free, or at least, that's what she thought. He paused briefly, then added the words that changed everything. But she remained subject to recall. Recall. Emily already knew. She had always known this was possible, that the military never fully let go of the people it shaped. Dr. Harrison stepped forward slightly. Recall? Why? The Marine looked at him. His expression was respectful but firm. "That information is classified, sir." Classified. Another word that didn't belong in hospitals. Another word that didn't belong in Emily's quiet civilian life. Kelly shook her head. This can't be real. But it was. Because the Marines weren't pretending. They weren't confused. They were here with purpose. And Emily wasn't denying it. The Marine turned back to her. "There's a transport waiting." Transport. Not a car. Not a ride. A military transport. Prepared. Planned. Official. Emily felt the weight of the moment settle fully onto her shoulders. For 3 years, she had lived as someone else. Someone ordinary. Someone invisible. She had traded combat boots for soft hospital shoes, traded battlefields for patient rooms, traded life and death chaos for controlled medical routines. She had tried to become Emily the nurse, not Staff Sergeant Carter, not the woman who had crawled through sand under enemy fire, not the woman who had carried wounded soldiers to safety while bullets tore through the air around her. She had tried to leave that person behind, but the military never forgot its soldiers, and it never forgot her. Kelly stepped closer. Her voice trembled. "Why didn't you tell us?" Emily looked at her. Not defensive, not ashamed, just honest, because it wasn't who I wanted to be anymore. The words hung in the air, raw, real. Dr. Harrison studied her face. Everything made sense now. Her calm during emergencies, her control, her awareness. The way nothing ever surprised her. She hadn't learned those things in nursing school. She had learned them in war. The Marine spoke again. "We apologize for the disruption, Staff Sergeant." Apologize. The Marines were apologizing to her. Not the hospital, not the doctors. Her, because rank didn't disappear just because the uniform did. Emily nodded once, acknowledging it, accepting it. Behind her, the ICU machines continued their steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Normal, peaceful, safe. Everything the battlefield had never been. She looked around the ICU one last time, at the nurses who had ignored her, at the doctors who had underestimated her, at the life she had built in silence. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to feel it, the loss, not of status, not of rank, but of peace. Because she had known this day might come, the day she would have to become Staff Sergeant Carter again. The Marine waited. Patient, respectful, ready, not rushing her, because soldiers understood transition, understood sacrifice, understood what it meant to leave one life behind and return to another. Emily reached up slowly. Her fingers touched her nurse name tag. Emily, such a simple identity, such a fragile illusion. She unclipped it gently, held it in her hand, and for a moment she hesitated, not out of fear, but out of farewell. Emily stared at the name tag resting in her palm. The small plastic rectangle felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't just a piece of identification. It was proof of the life she had tried to build. A quiet life. A normal life. A safe life. Behind her, no one spoke. No one knew what to say, because how do you say goodbye to someone you never truly knew? Kelly stepped forward slowly. Her voice was softer now, almost fragile. Emily. She stopped herself. That name didn't feel complete anymore, didn't feel accurate. Emily turned toward her. For the first time since she arrived at the hospital, her walls weren't fully intact, not broken. Just enough to let the truth breathe. Kelly swallowed. "You saved so many people here." Her eyes filled with emotion. "Why didn't you ever tell us who you were?" Emily looked down briefly, not out of shame, out of reflection. "Because here," she said quietly, "I was just a nurse. Just a nurse." The words carried no bitterness, only gratitude, because being just a nurse had given her something war never could: peace. Dr. Harrison stepped closer. His voice carried respect now. Real respect. Not the casual professional kind. The earned kind. "The way you handled emergencies," he said slowly. "The way you stayed calm." He paused. "It makes sense now." Emily met his eyes, and for the first time he understood what he had been seeing all along. Not a quiet nurse. Not an antisocial coworker. A soldier. A leader. A survivor. The Marine waiting beside her spoke gently. "We're ready whenever you are, Staff Sergeant." Not rushing, not demanding. Waiting, because they understood this wasn't just movement. This was transition. Emily nodded once, then turned back toward the ICU, toward the patients, toward the machines, toward the life she had lived for the past 3 years. Her eyes stopped on room 12. The patient inside slept peacefully, alive, safe, because she had been there, because she had chosen to save lives in a different way. Not on battlefields, but here, in quiet hospital rooms. She stepped toward the nurses' station. Slowly, every movement deliberate, every step meaningful. She placed the name tag on the counter. Not discarded, not thrown away. Placed, with respect, because that identity mattered too. Kelly's voice trembled. "Will you come back?" The question hung in the air. Heavy, hopeful. Emily looked at her, and for the first time, she smiled. A small smile, but real. "I don't know." Honest. Because soldiers didn't make promises they couldn't guarantee. The Marine beside her stepped back slightly, giving her space, giving her dignity, because rank deserved that. Emily turned toward the exit. The Marines moved with her, not ahead of her, not pulling her, escorting her, not as a civilian, but as their staff sergeant. As they walked through the ICU, something unexpected happened. Dr. Harrison stood straighter. Without realizing it, his hand lifted slightly. Not a full salute, but something close, a gesture of respect. Kelly followed. Then another nurse and another, until the hallway that had once ignored her now honored her, not with words, but with understanding. Emily noticed, but she didn't react dramatically, because she hadn't done any of it for recognition. She had done it because it was who she was. Outside, sunlight poured through the hospital entrance, bright, blinding. A military vehicle waited at the curb, engine running, ready, prepared, just like her. She stopped at the doorway for one final moment, not to hesitate, but to remember the quiet, the peace, the life she had briefly lived as Emily the nurse. Then she stepped forward, into the light, into the life she had never truly left behind. The Marines followed. The vehicle door opened. She stepped inside, and just before the door closed, the lead Marine looked at her one more time. His voice was quiet, respectful. "We're honored to have you back, Staff Sergeant." Not ordered, not required, honored, because soldiers like her weren't replaceable. They were remembered. The door closed. The vehicle drove away, and inside St. Gabriel Medical Center, the ICU returned to normal. Machines beeped, doctors worked, nurses moved, but something had changed. Because now they knew, the quiet nurse they had overlooked, the one they had underestimated, the one they had never truly seen, had never just been a nurse. She had been a warrior, a protector, a staff sergeant, and she had never needed recognition to prove her worth. Because true strength didn't announce itself. It revealed itself when the moment demanded it. And when it did, the world saluted. If you felt the shock, the respect, and the courage in Emily's story, imagine what she's done in silence before anyone even knew. Don't miss out on more jaw-dropping true stories like this. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and be the first to witness the untold heroism hiding in plain sight. And tell us in the comments which moment shocked you the most.